welcome back to Not So Obvious Watches. I'm Pete McComble. One of the quirks of tracking weeks per year is that weeks and years don't necessarily line up nicely. Hence, here we are. I'm filming this on the 31st of December 2019, but week 1 of 2020 actually started yesterday. So this is the week 1 of 2020 news service. Now, I wasn't thinking of doing a news channel, a news program over this period because not a lot happens during Christmas and New Year's. However, I have been surprised at some actually pretty interesting articles that have come out that aren't simply retrospectives and looking back at top 20s, bottom 5s, that sort of thing. Those are good. They're worth watching, but there's nothing there that's so noteworthy that I'm going to bother picking through them and giving you the bests and worsts of other people's bests and worsts. But here's about 5 or 6 things that are in the watch media at the moment that I'd really recommend you go check out. Or, if not things in the media to check out, just some news that's been announced that's worth thinking about and knowing. The first thing is, no one likes a little bit of I told you so more than me, and I was really interested to read the article in FRATELLO this week about Baselworld and what's happening with Baselworld and independence, given all the news we've been having of Seiko, Grand Seiko, Casio, and all the other brands that are leaving. And in short, as those brands are leaving, as the bigger Main Street brands are leaving, Baselworld is actively courting and getting some traction with the independents. Now, the reason I like this is because that's pretty much what I thought and have been saying was going to happen all year. That Baselworld, with its 2 massive tent poles of Patek Philippe and Rolex, and then with a little cluster of biggish brands from LVMH around them, simply crowds out any other name brand. Any other name brand that can afford to run their own show should do so, should run from Baselworld as fast as you can, because to be at Baselworld basically means you're always going to be treated as second fiddle. And if you want to be a main player, that's a bad place to be. That just reinforces your secondary status in the marketplace. On the other hand, if you're a smaller producer, if you can't afford, or it's not really the look you want to be out there all on your own, such as a lot of the smaller independents, moving around the big sharks of Baselworld like a remora fish is an eminently sensible business strategy. And so I think Baselworld's beginning to cotton onto this and realize that it's a fool's errand chasing more main pole kind of brands, and instead chasing independence is the way to go. If they could end up with 6 or 7 big well-known names and maybe 400, 500 very small companies, that's probably the best outcome possible for Basel moving forward. The Fratello article talks a little bit about this, talks about the things that Baselworld's trying to do to get that interest, and I'd suggest you go read it. Next, I'd like to send you over towards the QUILL and Pad website. And the QUILL and Pad is a really curious little website. I really enjoy it. It does a lot of more cerebral, kind of off Broadway kind of article. So again, as I said, I'd really recommend people go check that out. 2 really good ones this week. The first is sort of an accessible look at the science of ceramics and how ceramics are used in bezels and cases, why they can't be used in some parts, what their pros, what their cons are, but also what's the physics behind why they are what they are. It's a really interesting read. It's really well presented. It treads that fine line between being accessible but without being condescending or patronizing. I'd again really recommend you go read it, and it'll help you understand a lot more about ceramics and their place in the watch world. Also on QUILL and Pad was possibly the single geekiest article I can remember reading, which is a story of the watch crown. as in that little thing that we pull in and out and wind our watches, an entire story about the history and the development and the use and the engineering behind the crown. Now, I haven't read anything like this before. I found it really quite interesting. I found it really enlightening about something I'd always taken for granted but never actually thought about before. So again, recommend you go check it out, get your geek on, and you will certainly know some things that I can pretty much guarantee you didn't know about watches before you read that article. From Quill and Pad, I then point you over towards Monochrome, and Monochrome have got the first detailed article I've seen written about the PowerMatic movement, which has been turning up in swatches and Tissot's and I think Rados, but definitely Mitos over the last 5 or 6 years. Everyone's kind of known it's clearly the development of some of an older ETA, probably 28, 24. That's what we knew. This article goes right into the weeds of what has Swatch done and why did they do it and what's the point of this movement and how is it different to the others and what's its future going to be moving forward. Given the key importance of this movement, in so many Swatch brands, and also given some of the discussion that's been happening recently about the relationship between ETA and the other players in the Swiss watch industry, really worth checking that article out and understanding this movement that will possibly be the workhorse of maybe half a dozen brands for the next 2 decades. Well worth checking out. And I should say, I was actually really stunned at the amount of work that's been done to take it from the old ETA movement to the new PowerMatic. It caught me by surprise. Now we'll bring it back local to Time and Tide, also based here in Melbourne, Australia. And I was actually at a Time and Tide event at the end of year Christmas party 2 or 3 weeks ago, chatting to some of their staff, and they were talking about the discipline it took to get all these articles written before the Christmas break so they can continue to be released whilst there's no one actually in the office. I wish I had that kind of A, resource, and B, discipline. I will try to do better next year, but we'll talk about what I'm doing next year later. Anyway, over the last week and a bit, I've seen 2 really interesting things that I would highly recommend on the Time and Tide article. And again, I'm a bit of the reason perhaps I'm a fan of these 2 is because they're kind of repeating things I've been saying this year. So the first is an article that they've done about the 6 fashion brands that are doing really well in the watch industry, establishing themselves as serious watch companies. And they didn't say this, but I will say it. I think the potential rise of these fashion brands and them bringing everything they know about marketing and all their brand power, I think these companies represent a serious threat to the current dominance of Rolex. These are people who could shift the market away from the current kind of Rolex mania that's going on. So the brands they mention are probably no surprise to any of you. There's Bulgari, Hermes, Louis Vuitton, Tiffany & Co, Chanel, and one that caught me by surprise because I didn't really think of them as a fashion brand was Montblanc. I think of them as a pens brand, perhaps maybe a luggage brand, but then isn't that Louis Vuitton as well? So yeah, we'll call Montblanc a fashion brand. So those fashion houses bring a level of expertise and customer engagement and marketing and sales and advertising that I think a lot of the other Swiss watch companies have kind of missed and have allowed Rolex to a march on them. I think these companies are much smarter, they're much more agile, they're much better at what they do, which is sell product to high-end players than a lot of Swiss watch companies. And I think that skill set is what poses a real threat to Rolex moving forward. And the final article I'm going to talk about in someone else's media is again at Time and Tide, and it's Andrew McCutcheon's letters letter from the editor marking the end of this year. And what he talks about there is the kind of the sameness that's been emerging in the watch collecting community over the last few years. The kind of follow the herd mentality that's really grown up, and how so much of that can be attributed to this desire to buy and collect watches which retain value, and that using retained value as some sort of metric of the worth, the horological worth of a watch, that retained value somehow indicates a better watch, and how that's had this real homogenizing effect on the marketplace. I agree completely with everything that's there. It's something I've been saying all year, that seeking out retained value and brands that hold is kind of toxic to the notion of being a collector, kind of gets in the way of luxury. Andrew says it probably better than I do, and again, it's always nice to have someone agree with you, so go over and read his article there, and you'll get a better understanding of some of the stuff I've been trying to talk about this year, in how we need to break out of some of this retained value and holding value straitjacket. Since it's got to the end of the year, some things I should talk about with the channel. It's been great. I've grown from essentially nothing to coming up on 2,500 viewers. I've been monetized. I've got my first review piece in from another company that I didn't have to buy myself. I've opened up discussions with some brand owners and some people, so that's all been great. That's been a great year. Oh, I left out, I've actually gone to my first events. So I've gone to a couple of Time and Tide events, and I've gone to my first Red Bar event with Red Bar Melbourne. Everything that people tell you about going to watch community events and that interaction is true. I have had a ball at all of those events. The Red Bar event in particular was just wonderful. I had a fantastic time. So if you are a Red Bar person that was there, thank you so much. I had a great time. And yeah, if you are out there in your, watching this on the train or in your study or, on the TV when all the kids are in bed, all I would say is, if there is a Red Bar or a watch club or something in your area, try and get along to it. It's really fun and it's really enjoyable, and it's just great to be able to talk about watches and not be worried about having the person across from you have their eyes glaze over and get that look of help me, someone get me out of this. So that's enough of the past. Now, this is either the last video of 2019 or the first video of 2020. It can sort of be either. Let's talk quickly about what my plans are for this channel next year. It's essentially just keep doing what I'm doing, get a little bit better, continue to grow both in terms of subs, but also me as a creator. Probably stretch myself to go further into the sorts of things that a good YouTuber would be doing, that someone who's interested in watches should be doing, that I haven't had the expertise or the courage or the comfort to do. So that could be some better editing, some better video work, might mean trying to do some actual interviews with people, going on site and looking at actual where watches are made or how watches are worked on. I want to try and do some of that next year. So I'm not planning any great changes of direction, really just continuing the growth that I'm on, but just getting better at it and stretching myself to places where I haven't felt comfortable or capable of going just yet. So that's really about it. Thank you very much for a great 2019. If you're looking at this as a retrospective, I cannot wait, and I'm looking forward to a great 2020 if you're looking at this as my first video of year 2020. Thanks very much for watching it. If you hang on a little bit, a card's going to come up with my Instagram details and and an email address. Feel free to contact me in either of those. Give us a follow over on Instagram. You'll get to see a little bit more of my life, my photos, my watches. Since I'm remembering to do a wrist check today, I am wearing the Panzera Flieger 47, my first ever review piece. I'm preparing the review of this now. It should be on the channel in the next week or so. Yeah, it's been great. Please hit that subscribe button. I always forget this. Please hit that subscribe button. Even better, hit the little bell icon as well. And yeah, we'll grow together in 2020. Bye.